We're back in One Piece, baby! It has been roughly a year since I went ahead and put down One Piece, and now I am picking it back up because not too long ago I was on the One Piece podcast, but also I heard a lot of very interesting things about Egghead Island. Wano I found to be interesting, but wasn't really one of my favorite One Piece arcs, and I wasn't really inspired to make content about it. I also used that year and a half, however long it was, plus time, to consume a bunch of other manga, but Egghead Island has pulled me back in a big way.
I love this shit.
Now, I'm not trying to say that Wano was bad. It was just a mid-level One Piece arc for me, which is still really good, but it didn't emphasize the parts of One Piece that I personally really love. Egghead Island absolutely is doing so. Even on just the surface level of, oh, there's like a mad scientist type island, is gonna be right up my alley. I am a slut for mad scientists ever since I watched Back to the Future when I was a little kid, and then just continued to watch things like Futurama as I grew up. And pretty much any other type of mad scientist character you can think of, I've likely consumed and dearly enjoyed. So when I heard rumblings about a mad scientist island, I was like, I'm in.
It was made for me.
And this has been delivering on that premise in all kinds of surface level ways. Like, oh my god, the outfits the Straw Hat Crew got day one, killer. I love the like sci-fi punk aesthetic that is being achieved and just containing like this sprawling lab filled with wild inventions that of course Luffy then eats so much printed food from. Which if you happen to want more 3D printed food, guess what's featured in my recently released book, Neon Ghost, a witch's if 3D printed food really tickles your fancy.
You whore.
But in a big way, whenever a mad scientist is attempted, I hope to see something fresh brought to that archetype, and absolutely that was achieved with Vegapunk, a figure whose shadow has danced across the story of One Piece for a long time now, and this unveiling of him didn't fail to meet expectations, because Egghead Island, he had quite the cranium that continued to grow as his intellect did. To solve this unwieldy problem, Vegapunk has split his personality into a bunch of different avatars that all upload their consciousness and information they gain to like a central server that he can then access. That's super cool. It's not the most original thing, but with the aesthetics and the personality that's coming through, it certainly is hitting. But all of this setting is then structured around slowly unveiling one of the biggest mysteries of One Piece up until this date, and that is the true story of Kuma and how this terrifying figure came to be. And in typical Oda fashion, he's decided to tear at your heartstrings and show you that Kuma might actually be a new fan favorite character for not being the dad, but as all the memes are saying, the dad who stepped up. So let's get into this story a little bit, because yes, there's been military type people arriving and covert things I'm sure we'll get on into in later chapters, but here I want to focus on the flashbacks because that's what the most recent chapters have been focusing on, and god damn!
Does that hurt you?
Yes!
Good. Pain is your friend.
Keeping it brief because I'm sure many of you have already read this, we see in Kuma's past he was actually working as a priest or a pastor, terminology, I'm not a very religious person, in a village, and using his power to take pain away from people who are suffering from all kinds of illnesses. He lived with a woman named Jenny who fell in love with him, and they wanted to get married, but at the same time, they were living under a tyrannical rule, and as things got worse, the two of them were motivated to join the Revolutionary Army with Dragon. And though we haven't been, of course, allowed to spend like as much time with these crews in the past as we are with our Straw Hat crew, one of Oda's great strengths is just making you feel like you understand their crews and their dynamics just from like partially their design, how they interact, their dialogue. He's got this efficiency with characterization and character relationships that I genuinely believe deserves like study. The reason this ties so importantly into what's going on with the Straw Hat crews though is because we have also met a woman who has arrived at the island at roughly the same time as the Straw Hat crew who claims to be Kuma's daughter named Bonney. Now Bonney has the ability to affect the age of herself and others around her. So while she seems to physically appear, I want to say like late teenager, I'm not entirely sure, I think the Her actual age as of right now is about 12, which would explain a whole lot of her mannerisms, and is on a mission against Vegapunk to cure her father of his non-sentient condition, now that he's all... And so many people were throwing out all kinds of theories about when and how this child could have been conceived, but within the last 2 chapters, 1098 and 1097, it has been confirmed that he is not the biological father. As endless memes are saying online, Kuma is not the stepfather, he's the father that stepped up.
Literally me needing to pause to figure out how to talk about this next part.
Because we're getting into some dark stuff here. Jenny was kidnapped by a celestial dragon while she was a member of the Revolutionary Army and forced to be one of their wives, which I can't say the word that this implies to have happened because YouTube will demonetize this video, but yeah, what you're thinking is how Bonney was conceived. How did Jenny escape though? Even somehow more twisting the knife in, it seems that she contracted a sickness that we'll get into more in a minute during her time with the celestial dragons who are abusing her, and even though she had just given birth to a child, as soon as it became clear she was going to die, they just abandoned her. She then was able to make it home to her village, where she made a call to the Revolutionary Army, and as soon as Kuma heard she was free, before she even said where she was, he used his powers to get back home because he knew that is where she would be, and it's those small details, oh god, that Oda does that re-emphasize like the relationships between people that help his really condensed chapters where he's trying to communicate all this information to you still be effective. Because, bit of a meta note here, this chapter was actually even released unfinished. There are panels from it that look rough. They still actually look quite good, but Oda is just trying to crank it out right now. And I would prefer, of course, as a fan, that he maybe take a bit more time, polish it all, maybe release some slightly bigger chapters, but I get why there's a crunch happening and these things need to occur. And I don't want to encourage crunch in any way, shape, or form, but I do need to say, as a critical reviewer, it's amazing that even with these constraints, how effective these chapters are coming across right now. Sometimes where they end is a bit frustrating, but still, I find myself just wowed by how emotionally effective One Piece still manages to be, even as it's treading into not foreign, it's been dark before, territory, but territory emotionally and tonally where the series doesn't rest. And now getting more focused on 1098, I have so much to say here because holy crap. Am I going to be theorizing the best I can? Please keep in mind, I just took a 1.5 year break from the series, so everything I get wrong, I'll just be like, yeah, you're probably right. I'm having to pull from old memories after consuming like 30 stories between now and when I read Wano, but I'll do my best.
Try your best.
And also, I'm willing to admit the last time I tried to do a big prediction for the future of One Piece, I was entirely wrong. But Kuma arrives and sees Jenny just as she is dying, and of course is going to go and take care of her child. Well, he's been fighting, and it's reemphasized again in this chapter, recklessly in the war. That's kind of the characterization we've gotten from Kuma so far in these times, in these flashbacks, is that he is someone who is going to passionately give whatever he's fighting for his all. So while he'll recklessly fight in a war, as soon as what he sees needs to be done is not that, but instead to raise this kid, he's able to kind of just flip this switch and go from that battle mindset instead into being just a great father. And in these panels, for just how brief this chapter is, that is so layered into the text, because we see Bonney is suffering from the same disease that killed her mother. In fact, she won't make it past 10 is one of the notes this chapter ends on. But even in that horrible cloud, Kuma is there to make this child not only feel confident, but not aware of a doom that apparently is just around the corner for her. We see she's chasing other kids out of a church who are accusing her of being a vampire, and Bonney, having the ferocity of her mother and the strength of her father, is like, you stupid idiots, I live in a church, of course I'm not a vampire, put your cross away. Religion in One Piece. It's just vague.
Oh no, I'm not touching that one.
It's not just Kuma though who stepped up to be this amazing dad. We also see the elders of the village that Kuma was sacrificing so much of himself before to help with, are also helping rear the child, like showing him how to feed the baby correctly. And during these scenes of seeing Kuma like work to raise these kids, we have just panels spliced in showing the ferocity of the fight he was just involved with, which really emphasizes like the psychological condition and management that Kuma is pulling off. Like going from one extreme to the other of the emotional violence this man is having to put up with, and not letting that crack through to then be taken out in any way, shape, and form on this child. Amazing. He's still this just hulking guy, so it's you want to hug him so much. But there is a darkness here. I mean, it's even emphasized that the windows of the church have been shuttered because natural sunlight makes Bonney's condition worse. And so, while yes, we're seeing this wholesome display, there is this backdrop, this single note hit from the author to let you know, yeah, he's doing his best, but it's not all okay. It's reflective of what's happening to Bonney's skin with this sickness she inherited from her mother, where it's like a little beautiful jewel, as Kuma calls it, where, yeah, it's beautiful. Means you're also gonna die.
Jesus, dude.
But in this calm current, 1098 manages to lull you in this time where we're seeing Kuma with his daughter. It's shattered right at the end because we get this back-to-back of informed, yes, Bonney, according to this chapter, was doomed to die around age 10. Obviously, because of where we're seeing her now on Egghead Island, that was subverted somehow. We'll get into that. But then we see this final boot drop. 1 year later, the nightmare returned to Sorbet Island. Kumachi, you have to help. King Bakori's gone and done it again. It's 16 years ago all over again. He's gonna burn everyone he thinks is weighing the country down. He's inhuman, I tell ya. They're slaughtering folks in the streets. And where this is implied to go with Tyrant Kuma and the propaganda theme that's been heavily layered in throughout Egghead Island begs so many more questions. And that's kind of the balance that One Piece is perpetually in, right? As questions are answered, Oda always carefully folds in another question to be right on the verge of about to be answered, and then sets up another one down the road. And so we as readers are constantly like, satisfied, curious, satisfied, curious. Now, going back through everything I just said and actually getting into like my full review and thoughts before we get into predictions, the capturing of Jenny and what this meant for the people who were her crew. I have seen talked about, the Revolutionary Army quite a bit because people have been saying like, well, why wasn't a rescue mission launched? I think because they're in a direct war. I mean, yes, if you're someone like Luffy who has far less responsibilities and commitments than someone who's trying to orchestrate an active war and like helmet as a admiral, I almost said general, that would have been a mistake. Someone who's commanding many ships, you can't just recklessly go and try and sacrifice everything you're trying to build and fight for just one person. Though, I don't think it's been definitively said that they did nothing during this time. I think that'd be a bit of a mistake to assume. And I disagree with the idea that this lack of information from us of knowing what exactly happened while she was taken, what measures were attempted, detracts from the emotional stakes. Like, this still, to me, not for me, but I'm able to tell to this crew who are able to get a pretty solid impression from, because as I mentioned before, Oda's ability to just make you understand character and relationships with extreme speed, it feels like they're Nico Robin, they're Zoro, they're Usopp, someone was taken. What I'm trying to get at and say here is like, while there is clearly some stuff being left on the cutting room floor in terms of like sitting with the crew and seeing them suffer as they worry about someone who means so much to them, I almost like, in a way, I'm not saying it's perfect, that it's been left up to our imagination, because we've all been sitting in a hospital room or something and wondering what's going to happen to someone we care about. And if you explicitly show it, it can almost detract in like a horror sense from the actual terror of experiencing that. Does that make any sense at all, or do you think I'm reaching? Like, I feel the weight of this span of time where Jenny was gone on these people having to wake up every day, and like, I can infer from the emotions on their faces, it's like the first thing they think about, right? Like, especially Kuma, like every day she's gone, it's what's on his mind. And that layers into like the extreme psychological weight going on to Kuma right now. And I think that's the brilliance of where 1098 ends, because yes, he has managed to be a good father. He has managed to fight in a war and win. Now this conflict is coming up again, and he has a lot of pent-up emotion and another awful inflicting of pain on the smaller man by someone that Kuma already hates seems like the match about to drop in the keg of gunpowder. And whether or not we're actually going to see some form of tyrannical Kuma, or that's going to be the propaganda, I believe personally, twisting what he's about to do, which I do think will go too far. I think we're going to see Kuma cross a line here, but it will be understandable. It will be something where we're like, yup.
Too much? I went too far.
My personal theory is as well, he may either use his powers to somehow take Bonney's sickness, or he's going to strike a deal with Vegapunk to have something done to him to then have Vegapunk cure Bonney. Though I don't think that fits with the characterization of Vegapunk we've gotten so far. It's me and pronunciations. I'm getting half them wrong. I'm well aware of that. Vegapunk is officially Vegapunk, just with his head entirely deflated. But once Kuma has that sickness, it makes sense to me if he uses his powers to cure Bonney, that he would then need to do something extreme to prevent himself from succumbing to it as well. And that would be, I think, something he strikes with Vegapunk. Or Vegapunk, if you prefer my alternative. In terms of emotional poignancy of this as well, there was also a deliberate choice not to inform you of the reader of who exactly Bonney's father is. And Bonney hasn't expressed any interest in finding out who like her biological father is, and that's very good. I think that is the correct call. Not only does it allow you to take that anger you feel for what was done to Ginny and paste it on the entire enemy, but it also reemphasizes something that is absolutely true. Yes, blood is thicker than water, but the actual end of that saying implies you can still choose the people who you call family. And Kuma, and this is objectively true, don't fight me on this, is Bonney's father. And I hope my father doesn't mind me saying this. I come from a family where my dad was adopted, and he has no interest in finding out who his biological parents are, because he's like, no, my mom is my mom, my dad is my dad. Those are the people who raised me. It's much more complex than that, but that's my dad's story to tell. There is this fact in fiction that great storytellers are aware of, and that is that good people in the real world do bad things. What separates good people from bad people is why, and whether or not they grow and change after they do something that is bad. And Kuma is set up, in my opinion, to do something not necessarily bad, but too far. And from there, I think seeing him make some kind of ultimate sacrifice to try and grow or try and redeem makes a lot of sense and lines up thematically with where I think Oda is trying to position the story. I mean, even when the old people show up to raise the alarm at the very end of the chapter, the second to last panel, they're already soaked in blood. Like, everything here is emphasizing we're about to see just something big, and I'm excited.
Blood will be shed!
I really hope we see Kuma restored, because after a bit of a darker stretch from One Piece, it would feel so appropriate for him to be able to get to witness Luffy and what he is a harbinger of, and share that with Bonney, someone who also has sacrificed so much and lost so much due to the bigger enemies that have been so effectively built up. It would feel really right, especially with the complex relationship Luffy and Kuma kind of have, I guess, maybe, depending on some unanswered questions for Kuma's current condition. I'm ready for more. That's where I'm gonna let my predictions lay. I'm gonna be hopeful, because I don't think Oda is gonna go full on grimdark here and not let Kuma witness the payoff for so much of his sacrifice, even if it is in a dying moment. I want him to have that with Bonney and to have some kind of dialogue with Luffers. And I think we're seeing important characters aligned for the final answers of this series. Egghead Island really feels like a linchpin, whatever the proper terminology is here, for the next larger arc. I know this is gonna be a smaller one for One Piece, because certain characters need to be set into position to fully enact justice on the Celestial Dragon types, Blackbeard types. And on the chessboard of that final conflict, it seems like we're seeing our final pieces come into play. And that is what's kind of pumping this final wave of energy into Egghead Island for me. That's getting me oh so excited. I know the running meme for so long with One Piece is like, I don't know, 5 more years for the last 20 years. But right now, like, this momentum-wise, structure-wise, actually feels like we are being positioned as readers to go on that final stretch. And it's like in the air. It's in the air of Egghead Island. So one thing I want to insert here that actually was suggested by Murph I should talk about, and yeah, I want to get my thoughts on this because maybe they're a little bit polarizing. I don't want to come across like I'm purely gushing over Egghead Island, and I do have kind of a big criticism, and it's the kind of insistence
the murder mystery subplot, we don't know these characters well enough to care. And I think Oda keeps trying to be like, this is a big part. Fortunately, it's not a big enough part to spoil the rest of the arc. But that to me is the weakest angle.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. Next week, I'll be doing a deep dive not only into more One Piece, but also Empire of Silence, the first book in the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruccio, because I am about halfway through it right now and I have thoughts. So get ready for that to hit you soon as well. And a interview with Brandon Sanderson dropping
Next week.
Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Check out my books and have a good one, y'all. Peace.